Hello and welcome to the Royal Beat, the show that brings you up to speed with all the latest royal news, as well as delving into our rich and royal past. And coming up on today's show, we're going to be taking a look back at the party princess, the rebel princess, the life and times of Princess Margaret, and be asking what it was that made her so fabulous and so well loved. Plus, as we approach the anniversary of the death of the late great Princess Diana, we'll be taking a look back at what made her the ultimate royal style icon. And here today to help me work through that and more is royal journalist Robert Jobson. Great to have you back, Jobbo. Royal biographer Christopher Warwick is with us again. Long time since we saw you back in Queen Victoria's bedroom.
At least a year. At
Kensington Palace. And for the first time, royal commentator and fashion journalist Claudia Joseph is with us. Welcome one and all. Are you well?
Yes, absolutely. How are you?
Very good.
Good.
Perked up no end after, well, what was a sight for sore eyes. The changing of the guard, the first changing of the guard, which was performed at Buckingham Palace since the beginning of the pandemic. And what a treat that was for all of our royal watchers. It's
always hugely impressive, isn't it? I mean, if you can get there early enough and, you know, not be at the back of a huge crowd, it really is.
It's a piece of theatre, isn't it?
It is. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Now, Christopher, I'm going to mine your historical knowledge because you know so much. What is the changing of the guard, please?
Well, the changing of the guard is basically the changing of the old guard and the new guard, the existing guard to the new guard that then takes over. And so you do get this wonderful ceremonial and the military band that goes with it, marching from Wellington Barracks to the forecourt of Buckingham Palace. They do the changeover. And then the old guard returns to Wellington Barracks. But it's wonderful pageantry, it's wonderful theatre, and of course people love it.
They absolutely do. And really nice to see them adapting some of our greatest pop hits to mark the occasion. So we had the Band of the Coldstream Guards, in honour of Britain's Olympians, played Spandau Ballet's Gold. Nice. The Olympic theme. Chariots of Fire, which I actually thought was really quite rousing and emotional, and Whitney Houston's One Moment in Time, all the Olympic greatest hits. Now, being spare to the air comes with its own set of challenges, and long before we saw a young Prince Harry succumb to London's nightlife, earning himself the title, reputation, if you like, of the party prince, well, I'm afraid his great aunt had already walked that path in stilettos many, many years before him. Princess Margaret, she was considered the party princess. Beautiful, hard partying, smoking, late night loving, cultivating friendships with a variety of celebrities and the most colourful characters in high society. Let's just take a little look at all of that.
She toyed with social conventions, especially the one that said well-bred women didn't smoke in public. Her vague education had included singing and piano lessons, and as a teenager, she'd indulged fantasies of being a performer. She loved popular music and loved mixing with the exotic showbiz set. She went to bed at dawn and rose at noon to go riding with her older sister, and still looked as fresh as a rose. Wherever she went, she was admired and applauded. Even her closest friends were obliged to call her Mom. She was never rebuked or criticized. It was an uncritical age. In the pre-paparazzi era, she was free to enjoy herself with young men, but none of them seemed to get past that wall of royal reserve.
Interesting watching just some of that brilliant footage there, and that documentary is rich with clips from years gone by. But what a stunning young woman she was. And
beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, it really was. And you can see why the public was so captivated by her. But let's start at the very beginning, because actually we all forget that she and Elizabeth had a relatively ordinary upbringing. And do you think that that stood them in some good stead for the roles that they later came to inhabit?
I wouldn't say it was ordinary.
No, I mean...
Relatively, I said.
I mean, it was... George VI referred to his wife, his daughters and himself as us four. And they really were this extremely tightly knit unit at the centre of the much broader royal family at that time. And of course, back then, the expectations, the responsibilities of royal life weren't quite the same as they are today, and where the Yorks, as they were concerned, that there was no thought ever of them becoming the first family, the royal family, you know, because it was expected that the Prince of Wales, or David as he was known in the family, would eventually give up his passion for other men's wives, find one that he could marry, and then presumably have an heir of his own. So,
which kind of gave the family and what happened next almost a sort of soap opera quality, didn't it? Because it wasn't in the script. It wasn't the path that had been carved out for the royal family.
I mean, it wasn't until she was, 10, the Queen, and that she said it all sort of fell upon them, and they then really had to have this. I mean, they were pretty unsuited, the whole family, you know, the stuttering king. And I don't think that he particularly wanted to be this at the forefront of all this publicity at all. And you know, he'd pretty much shielded his daughters from a lot of the publicity as well. Yeah. But all of a sudden, they're going to be this #1 family and recovering from the biggest crisis to face the monarchy ever, the abdication. The whole so he had to steady the ship. And it wasn't, you know, it wasn't going to be easy. And I think that actually, you know, he had a deep affection for both his daughters in protecting them, but you know he had a trust in the Queen and Princess Elizabeth. He felt that she was a solid character, but you know I think he had a faith it would be Margaret. She was you know, he was actually doted on. He doted on her.
But is it the same set of Charles with Harry now?
I think that he was closer to Harry, and that's why.
Yes.
I think that's why it's hit him quite hard with what's happened with Harry.
Yeah. But also, the Queen was said to, is reported to, she's never said this herself, obviously, have a close affection with Prince Andrew, for example, rather than Charles, who she's had to raise differently because of what lies ahead for him.
But that also might, I mean, if it's true, and you know, we're told, who tells us, but we're told Andrew is her favourite son. But don't forget, you see, he appeared 10 years after the birth of Anne. So you've got Charles, you've got Anne. Yeah. And then they got on with doing what the Queen and Prince Philip had to do.
I think that had a lot to do with it. The fact that she could be a mother properly for the first time,
and then of course
in a role.
And she'd learnt the ropes by then, so therefore when she had her younger children, she could be a relaxed mother.
Yes, absolutely right.
I mean, I can't really imagine that she would have told anyone that Andrew was her favourite son, so how on earth does that come out?
We deviate, because I need to take us back to the lady centre stage here in this photograph. It's not often that we see Margaret front and centre, is it? She had a reputation for being quite chippy, a little bit rude.
She could be more than a little bit rude.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, she was, you know, unlike the Queen has always been uncomplicated, well-grounded, very, very easy. Margaret could be, as I well know from knowing her all those years, there were times you could sit down and talk to her about absolutely anything and everything. There are other times, sometimes on the phone, sometimes when you were there, you'd gauge the mood when you walked in. I mean, there was one occasion, boiling hot day, and I was in collar and tie, lugging this bag of photographs with me because we were going through pictures for the biography. And there were times, and I thought it's a lot easier just to take a hand and kiss it. Well, I was very warm that day, and I walked in and I said, I think I really must kiss your hand, ma'am. Oh, she said, I don't think I want my hand kissed, so I gave her mine. Oh, she said, it is clammy, isn't it? You know, so I thought, well, there you go.
Very grand.
Yeah.
But I did get my own back, because going through the photographs, we finally came to the colour ones. Oh, she said, colour photographs, you didn't say. I said, you didn't ask.
And there is a glorious coloured photograph right there. I mean, three generations of the royal family. But she was considered by many to be quite the standout when it came to fashion. And many followed where she led, especially Anne. You know, we saw Anne many years later again, because she didn't have to be quite as well behaved and buttoned up as the Queen, because Charles was going to follow the Queen's path to the throne. But beautiful to see them in all their kind of pomp and glory.
Yeah. Well, Margaret, of course, I mean, when the new look came in, what was that, 50s?
1947.
As early as that?
So if you look at the Queen's wedding dress, she was still wearing Hartnell. And then Margaret, literally a couple of years later, was visiting Dior in his studio in Paris.
Yeah.
She introduced Dior to the Queen Mother and the Queen.
She?
Oh, yes.
So she was very influential in helping to connect the royals to the latest fashion.
I'm not sure they ever wore Dior. Margaret was very...
She did.
She wore Dior, well, for her 19th birthday portrait, I think.
She did.
And she wore Dior a lot, and she was very much... She was at the famous exhibition at Blenheim Palace, or exhibition, it was a catwalk show. Or
yeah, the fashion show.
Fashion show. And I think Margaret had the ability, she could experiment, and obviously she did, and she was always incredibly stylish.
Right to the end, actually.
Right to the end.
Yeah.
All the way through her life.
Yeah.
Let's talk about her as a young royal, because I think so many people feel, certainly of late, that they've got to know Princess Margaret through The Crown. How?
Yeah, well, they got to know Helena Bonham Carter.
Well, and the actress before her as well, who played
It
it
was
brilliantly.
good, wasn't she? Yeah,
Yeah, she was
amazing.
What's her name? Brilliant.
Was it Vanessa Kirby?
That's
Yeah,
it,
she
Vanessa
was
Kirby.
great.
Thank you,
Great.
Claudia. Let's talk about her early life, because she began a relationship with her father's equerry, Group Captain Peter Townsend, which went down, well, not very well, as you can imagine, amongst the royal family. And the Queen actually had to intervene.
No, the
Did
Queen.
she?
No, the Queen
She
didn't. You
didn't.
see, this is where the Crown has got it wrong. It said, you know, there's this idea latterly that the Queen prevented her sister from
She was
marrying
waiting for the
Townsend.
25th.
Yeah, I
birthday.
mean, it was.
And it was really the
was-
cabinet which had a few divorces
Yeah,
in it
yeah,
itself.
I mean,
But
what-
actually, it
hypocritically.
wasn't even the cabinet. Ultimately, it was Margaret herself who decided not
Oh no,
to.
I know that, but it was.
Because
it was
she didn't
Hold on,
want
one at
to
a time,
lose
one
her-
at a time, one at a time, otherwise I
But
can't hear you.
when the Queen, when Margaret had accepted Townsend's proposal, he proposed to her in the Crimson Drawing Room at Windsor Castle. The Queen had gone, Margaret had gone to the Queen and said what was going on, and she wanted to marry. And the Queen, you see, again, here, thanks largely to the Crown, you get the idea that the Queen asked her to wait for 2 years. Not true. When Margaret went to the Queen said, in the circumstances, I have to ask you to wait for a year. Now, I think the idea was that it might have all settled down and gone away within that year. It didn't. Margaret went back and said, we've waited the year. Can we now get married? And the Queen said, I have to ask you to wait another year. I think that was on ministerial advice. And as you've just mentioned, Robert,
Would you agree
pushing
with that,
her
Robert?
towards her 25th
It
birthday.
was, and also got to remember that at this stage too, you know, when the House of Lords probably had more influence, that it was the clergy as well.
Yep.
Where it had very big influence upon the cabinet's thoughts.
Well, because it's also easy for people not to know or to forget these days that divorce was a scandal. You know, we're so used to it today, but back then, divorce was a scandal, and Townsend had been divorced.
And of course, we'd had the abdication as well. So
Yes.
the last
Yes.
thing they want to do is repeat that.
Absolutely.
It was a family that was still healing, wasn't it? Had she pushed ahead and said, no, I'm going to marry him, would she have had to give up everything in order to do that, do you think?
There was
Yeah,
a good
pretty
chance,
much.
and that was behind a lot of
Yeah.
the thinking.
I think-
that was the suggestion. She would have had to pretty much give up everything in terms of the money, and that, I think that had a big influence upon her as well, because she had a certain lifestyle, and I think it was the position, and also I think the sense of duty. I think we were underestimating her sense of duty,
Absolutely.
and love for her father. I mean,
Yeah.
the expression that he used to use at the time was that, I remembered it now, Elizabeth is my pride, and Margaret is my joy. And so she had a deep sense of love and
Pride and
towards
Well, I mean,
to her father and his father's
well,
memory.
absolutely. I mean, Margaret absolutely adored her father.
Yeah.
But the whole Townsend business, and we now know it, we didn't know it at the time. And in fact, it was only just, the last 10 years or something when government papers were released for
Yes.
embargo. Margaret wrote
Yeah.
And this is very interesting. Margaret wrote to the then Prime Minister, Anthony Eden, in August of 1955, saying Townsend would be coming back on leave in October. The telling paragraph for me was that it's only by seeing him that I know if I can marry him.
Yeah, I think that they had not. That's the other thing. We're living in a world then of. There's no FaceTime. There's no, there's the odd phone call from now and again, and so they were basically, really out of touch with each other.
Yeah.
And whilst you're in a whirlwind romance and he's there all the time, serving as it was the Queen and the Queen Mother, he's there all the time. The passion's there, and she was a very young woman. And then I think that there were other distractions that came in that time as well.
Well,
there's no doubt she was in love with him, but
But I think it must have
But so you're saying that's
It faded,
you're saying that's 57, but in
55.
55. So 5 years later, in 1960, she announces her engagement to photographer Anthony Armstrong-Jones, a dashingly handsome young man.
But, and this is something, again, people either forget or didn't know, I said to her, there is this idea that you married Tony on the rebound. And she said, what? 5 years later, but there was a guy called Billy Wallace in between Townsend and Tony. Billy Wallace was an old friend who'd proposed to her before.
Right.
And she said to me
Never
that...
heard of Billy Wallace. This is good.
All right.
But there were other, I thought there were others as well.
No, just Billy.
But there was, who was the one? Oh, that was later on.
Robin Douglas Hughes.
Yeah, that's it.
The pianist, yeah. The 1 month dalliance.
Yeah.
Anyway, going back to Billy Wallace, he'd proposed. She said she would accept provided the Queen was happy about it and so on and so forth.
Did she love him?
She said it would be better to marry somebody one at least liked than not to marry at all. Billy Wallace
Thank
took
goodness times have changed, eh?
Absolutely. Billy Wallace took her, I'll marry you provided the Queen doesn't object. He took it as a yes. Off he went to the West Indies, had a fling, and as she put it to me, when he came back, he told me all about it and was astonished when I showed him the door.
That's
He
hilarious.
celebrated her acceptance of marriage by having a relationship
Yeah,
over...
Well, he went off to wherever it was. Yeah.
Well, good for her.
And then told her about it.
Yeah,
What a fool.
Absolutely, and came back
In
and
those
told her
days, she
about
probably
it.
wouldn't have found out otherwise.
And then, of course, Anthony Armstrong-Jones comes along. They were a beautiful couple. And again, this helped her mark a number of royal firsts. The first British royal wedding to be broadcast on national television.
Well, around the world.
Yeah.
Because there was an audience of 300 million.
Wow. Wow. That's huge, isn't it? This was a lavish wedding as well. There were 20 wedding cakes. There was a 60-foot floral arch and a dress that was made from more than 30 metres of fabric that we can see there. Talk to me about that marriage. Was it a happy union for a while?
Well, it was certainly volatile and it was certainly passionate. Whether or not it was happening. He was... what's the best way to put it? Sexually pretty fluid, I think.
Well, he was, wasn't he? Yeah.
Bisexual? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
But he was also, he was open about that as well, pretty much, in terms of his friendships with other women. And look, it was only going to end in one way, I think. It was a volatile relationship.
But
it wasn't all down to her.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. The blame is always stacked.
On her, but it's not fair.
And it's not.
Yeah.
He was a serial adulterer.
Yeah.
They were only, 3 weeks into their 6-week honeymoon when his mistress, Camilla Fry, gave birth to his daughter, Polly.
Yeah, we're talking that, it's not...
Wow!
Everyone seems to historically have seen this party princess, difficult woman. He couldn't adapt to the lifestyle. Actually, he's an aristocratic guy. He came from a good background. He was pretty, but we are in the swinging 60s, and nobody swung more than Anthony Armstrong-Jones.
Well,
I think that's probably the best way of putting it.
To put to the point that a mistress gave birth whilst he was on honeymoon with Margaret. Wow, there is so much to delve into. Sadly, we're almost out of time
Yeah,
on
I think they
this.
deserve, I don't know about an episode of The Crown, they need their own...
The whole series.
The whole spin-off.
But please do dive into the many documentaries that we have sat here on True Royalty, because, yes, what a life she led. bed. The late great Princess Margaret. Before we move on from her entirely, I just wanted to talk about a new exhibition that's currently on here at Kensington Palace, which is an amazing display of royal clothes from 5 designers. Is that right,
That's
Claudia?
correct, yes.
Yeah. And one of them is a beautiful dress that was worn by Margaret to a charity ball. Before we take a closer look at what's on display, here's a little preview for you. Okay, and that exhibition remains open here in London at Kensington Palace until January 2022. But what they're aiming to do with this, Claudia, and you'll know this because of your creds as a fashion journalist, is try to explore the relationship between the royal client and fashion designers. So talk me through what people will see if they manage to make their way through the doors of Kensington Palace for this.
Well, obviously the Margaret dress was designed by Oliver Messel, who was Lord Snowdon's uncle. He was a very famous theatrical costumier, stage designer. I mean, he was incredibly cultured and talented in almost every way. And this was a dress that Margaret wore for a charity costume ball.
I mean, this is almost Disney-esque, isn't it? It's like a Disney princess dress. Like the kind of thing you see all little 4-year-old girls trying to climb into, yeah.
Well, I think, yes, it looks very Cinderella.
Frozen.
Yes, Elsa, it's Elsa.
It's Elsa, it really is Elsa.
What's so extraordinary is when you see the detail of it, this was designed and made for only one occasion. I don't suppose she ever wore it again.
No,
It's not practical, is it? Look at those sleeves while you're trying to make tea and toast.
Well, I don't think any of the clothes.
Lost her head in his mouth.
But it's not just Margaret's clothes that are on display there as well. What else can we
Well, it starts off with a very under-known designer called Madame Hanley Seymour, who in fact was incredibly famous in her day, and she designed the Queen Mother's wardrobe. She designed the coronation gown.
This is the Queen Mother's coronation dress?
It's actually the toile, so it would have been the fitted version before they made the real version.
Right.
Obviously, the Queen Mother's coronation dress hasn't survived, I don't think. So they have been forced to show this, but I mean, you can see from the detail, we can see how incredible it was. And Madame Hanley Seymour really was the couturier of her day, although we haven't really heard of her, or most of us haven't. And she, effectively, she started off with a little workshop with four designers and ended up in Bond Street with 200 designers. And what she tended to do was she paid the famous Paris couturiers to copy their designs. So people like Paul Poiret and I don't know, Chanel and people like that.
She was
she was effectively a seamstress, but
she paid to copy their designs.
Exactly.
Right.
And
so really a fancy seamstress with a few
yes, but then designed her. Obviously went
by buying in other people's talented designs.
Well, that's what they did in those days.
Maybe that's why she hasn't stood the test of time in terms of people knowing about her and.
I think that probably is the case, sadly, but. Obviously, the historic royal palaces wanted to do something about that, so they've chosen her as one of the
embroidery is something else, isn't it?
Yeah,
The
detail is incredible. But of course, I think that the show-stopping dress
is
Diana's wedding dress, and I mean, so much is known about this dress already, and there it is on display, loud and proud, with the most extraordinary train, which. I mean, I remember watching this as a little girl when she climbed out of that carriage on the day, and we saw that train for the first time.
All crumpled.
Well,
yeah.
the Emanuels said later they hadn't thought of
the close confines of the coach.
Of the coach.
Yeah.
And Diana wanted
It's almost like they should have sort of clipped it on as she got out.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
I think it was clipped on underneath somehow, so I don't think
Yeah,
it could have done.
Yeah. As it got out, it looked. I remember thinking it looked terrible.
I mean, everybody, I think their mouth dropped open and said,
Well, no, it was.
You know, I mean, okay, and then of course when she went into the cathedral and there's David with his iron, you know, but the impact, it had been spoilt, you know.
Also, you've got to remember that we were in the pre-lycra days, pre-stretch fabric days. It was made of taffeta, which was about, you know, creases really badly. And if you look at both Diana's going away outfit and the wedding dress, it's
see that itself there, and it's lighter, and with the puffiness on the shoulders. It looks, I don't know what I'm talking about this for, but the fact is it just looks quite light and fun
if you
there.
had it in chiffon or something like that, it would have been completely different.
Very.
But it was very 80s.
Actually, in hindsight, it's probably one of the worst fabrics you could have possibly
Very
chosen.
80s.
Well, exactly.
In terms of it being able to kind of move.
But
that looks like the way they were originally designed. That looks like something out of, I don't know, you know, almost Elizabethan. Whereas that other one looked quite modern and you know.
But very heavy. I mean, when you look at it, you just think, God, that is very. My own feeling, I mean, she was a girl of 19. And for what it's worth, my view was that they should have gone for something much, much simpler.
Yeah, it looks like this is a dress for some sort of.
Well, when you juxtapose it with the dresses that we see more recently, when we see you know, the Kate Middletons and the Meghan Markles and the dresses that they wore, it's
but, you know, the
kind of
classic
symbolic
Grace,
of how time's moved on.
The classic Grace Kelly look and everything. That's really that Kate, in a way, hasn't followed. But that just seems so almost Elizabethan.
Yeah, it does.
But I'll tell you what it was. It was adamant. If you remember, that was the 80s. That was the fashion. Prince Charming, the frilly collars.
Yeah, it was the romantic.
That exact, and that was what Diana was influenced
of its time.
You know.
Now, a piece that is not just of its time but timeless. If you've got a few thousand pounds to spare. Then next month, Princess Margaret's Art Deco Cartier bracelet set with Mikimoto pearls is going up for auction. It's expected to reach upwards of $55,000, but I would say that's a pretty low estimate because in 2006, the gavel came down on this piece at $99,843.
You haven't got a few of those stashed away, have you?
So Claudia, what's so special about this piece and why is it back on the market?
She wore it for her 19th birthday portrait.
Yeah. I suppose it's owned by her children.
Well, I would assume so.
Well, if it's already been up for auction and had previously sold for $99,000.
Is it at the original Sotheby's auction, presumably?
Must have already sold it when they were clearing out Kensington Palace.
Who knows? But it's back in circulation.
Oh.
I'm guessing.
Haven't got the money.
I'm guessing that 55,000 is not what it will end up being sold
very
for.
much doubt it.
With that sort of provenance, I shouldn't think of treble, quadruple.
I mean, really, you know, when you look at the catalogue of the Christie's auctions back in, what was it, 2006, all of the estimates, you know, I mean, the Baltimore tiara, that iconic jewel, went for almost £1 million, which, you know, again, 2006 was worth a whole lot more than it is even now.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful picture, though. When you think of a princess, that picture does sort of sum up being a princess, doesn't it?
And if you look at the fabric of the dress compared with Diana's wedding
the lightness
dress,
on the seam to the shoulders.
The lovely chiffon and very delicate with the butterflies. And
now, we were talking about the fact that certainly one of the pieces we looked at earlier, the Elsa dress, as we'll call it, Robert, was probably worn just
Let it go.
Let it go, nice. He's here all week. We were talking about the fact that piece, that one particular dress was probably worn just the once. And we move now to a very fashion-conscious princess, Denmark's future queen, who's back in the news this week, as she attended the 2021 Copenhagen event, which celebrates LGBTI+ events with World Pride in the Eurogames, wearing a really eye-catching crimson dress and matching heels. And she is famous, as is Kate Middleton, as is Princess Anne, for never wearing something she loves just the once, for bringing it back time and time again. Is this the way the future royals should be going, do you think, Claudia?
Well, I think so. I mean, in fact, you have to look back to the Queen, I think, because she has memorably recycled her wardrobe, and obviously the Duchess of Cambridge looks very closely at what the Queen does and follows suit. But I think we are in a more sustainable age, and I think people look and think, you know, we're not going to fund that. We don't want our royals wearing an outfit once. It
But
just
it's, all,
looks
I
too
mean, but it's
extravagant.
also a myth that they only wear things once, you know. I mean, you just go back through the years, as you were saying, Claudia, with the Queen, same with Princess Margaret. Just go back through the pictures and you'll see just how many times they've worn the outfits. And in fact, there was an outfit, a dress that was designed for the Queen in
Gave to Princess
1972
Margaret.
that Princess Margaret ended up at the banqueting house wearing on one occasion. So it kind
There's
of...
several outfits that have passed down in the same way Kate passes on to Pippa
It'd be
and Carol.
ridiculous if they didn't. wouldn't it?
Well, exactly.
How many wardrobe spaces do you want? I mean,
And they also go to
But I don't know
charity.
why we call it recycling.
I know, it's really, we're just wearing it more than once.
We're just wearing, let's face it, rather expensive dresses
Yeah,
more than
crazy
once
not to.
to make the most of the cost of buying them in the first place.
But you mentioned the Princess Royal earlier on, and you look at some of the things Anne still wears. I mean, there's a coat from the
Yes.
1970s.
I'm just amazed that she can still get into things from 45, 50 years ago.
But the Duke of Edinburgh was the best.
Yes.
I mean, he would just wear suits that he had from 1943 or something like that, and they were forever altered, or he'd have patches, but everything.
But Charles does much the
And
same. We've
Prince
seen
Charles,
pictures of Charles
yes.
with
He's got
literally
his favourite
pockets
coat,
hanging
hasn't
off.
he?
Yeah.
That dreadful sort of Arthur Daley long brown
But we've
coat.
all got
So do you
those
think-
at home,
do you think
haven't
you
we?
really should not wear that
It's
anymore?
comfort. It's
awful.
just
Yeah,
comfort
awful.
dressing.
It's comfort. It's comfort.
But he always wears that at Christmas. You see, when he comes out there and he is,
And he was
dreadful
doing his
Arthur Daley
hedgerows,
coat, yeah.
wasn't he, recently?
Even the royals are allowed a comfy coat or cardi. Now, before we head for a break, I just wanted to touch on a story that we covered on the last episode of The Royal Beat. Princess Charlene of Monaco has finally, it's great to see, been reunited with Prince Albert and her children, the twins, after 3 months apart. They flew out to South Africa to be with her. She's said to be recovering from surgery over there and cannot fly. So do we know any more?
Well, I mean, they're very secretive, the royal family in Monaco. But I mean, they also had a lot of difficulties in that marriage that we, have not really been fully reported. But
Doesn't she look different?
Completely different.
In
fact, if you didn't know
unrecognisable.
it was her.
Yeah.
Well,
you wouldn't
actually,
think it was her.
but I think there was a lot of rumour because she cut her hair very short, didn't she?
Yes.
Just before she went to South Africa, and I think there was all sorts of rumours about the marriage at that stage, saying, why is she gone without the children? Why is she in South Africa?
Probably
from
because
South
I think the thing is you've got to remember with the Monaco, she
By
have to
herself.
get permission to take the children with her, and he would have the rights over the children. It's a really bizarre setup, and for her to take the children.
Well, the official,
Very
the official
difficult.
line is that she's got a serious sinus infection. And 2 weeks ago, she underwent a 4-hour operation under general anaesthetic. And yes, that's as much
But,
as
I
they've
mean,
released.
Princess Grace, when she was having problems with Prince Rainier, wanted to take the children and disappeared back to Paris. It wasn't going to happen. She was not taking the children out of the principality. So it's quite different. I think that, it's strange for a mother to disappear for that 3 months, and people say, well, why has she done that? She may not have had a choice.
But,
Yes,
if
exactly.
the marriage was good, you would have expected him possibly to have gone with her or taken the children to see her.
Well.
Or she might have been allowed, we're in a different
It's
era.
like a
But if
completely
we could
different
just
woman,
point
doesn't
out
she?
in this photograph, she has captioned this picture by explaining that her daughter has cut her own hair.
I was going to say,
And
that's
she
a hell of
tried
a
to-
haircut.
She tried to fix it. But
So
that's-
did her own to compliment it.
Yes. So, but I think, every mother can relate to that because we've all had our kids trying to pretend their
But
own
we don't then
haircuts.
pose for an official picture with a hair like that.
But there were stories right from the word go, weren't they, that she didn't want to marry him, and there were all kind of stories and
Well,
rumours.
There was a
various
love child,
mistresses and
wasn't
love
there?
children. It was all
Yeah,
a
it
bit
was all
difficult.
Sounds familiar, doesn't
suddenly.
it? It's like,
Yeah.
is there an echo in here? Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a short break now, but still to come, we're going to be looking back at the incredible life of Princess Diana as we prepare for the anniversary of her death. And is it true that the woman called the second most important woman in the Duke of Edinburgh's life will be making an appearance in The Crown? Find out after this. Don't miss The Royal Beat on True Royalty TV. The only on-demand TV channel devoted to the best documentaries about royalty. Find out why the Scottish and English queens became foes and how their feuds resulted in tragedy in Mary, Queen of Scots. We all know the story of Arthur, but is there any truth behind the legend and myth? Find out in King Arthur, the truth behind the legend. He's one of the most controversial figures in history, but was Henry a vicious tyrant or a victim of his age? Find out in History Makers, King Henry VIII. You can get this and so much more only on True Royalty, the home of Royal TV. Welcome back. Still to come, we'll be asking what you think about The Crown, featuring the second most important woman in Prince Philip's life, and asking, should Prince Andrew be able to hold on to his military titles? But first, on the 31st of August, we'll be commemorating the 24th anniversary of the death of the late, great Diana, Princess of Wales. And to celebrate her life and times, we have a series of fantastic new documentaries about her right here on True Royalty. Here's a little taste of things to come.
She came to us at a romantic, new, fresh time into the royal family. She came to save it in a way.
With her generous divorce settlement, she was seeking an independent life. She felt relaxed enough to kiss Charles goodbye at William's speech day in May 1997. They would never be seen in public again together. While holidaying in the south of France in summer 1997, Diana fell in love with Dodi Fayed.
I said to the princess, "When are you coming home?" "I'm coming home on Sunday, Paul. I'm on this boat. It's freezing cold downstairs. It's boiling hot on deck. I'm sending these pictures out, and nobody's coming back to me. I'm having no communication. I need to come home."
We're interrupting programmes to tell you that Diana, Princess of Wales, is gravely ill in intensive care in Paris's Salpêtrière Hospital after being seriously injured in a car crash which killed her friend, the Harrods heir Dodi Fayed.
And you can catch all of those documentaries and more from the 31st of August here on True Royalty TV. Now, as we get closer to finding out when we'll be able to catch the new season of The Crown, many royal fans have expressed their profound disappointment, actually, that Prince Philip's constant confidant, Penny Natchbull, the Countess of Mountbatten, is that her most...
Mountbatten.
Countess Mountbatten.
Yeah.
Is her most recent title, previously known as...
Lady Rumsey.
Lady Rumsey. Gosh, it's confusing. Will be making an appearance in the show. And we discussed earlier how we can end up rewriting history through something as huge as The Crown, with, for example, the whole storyline around Princess Margaret being asked to wait, which turned out not to be true by the Queen, to marry Peter Townsend. So when fact becomes fiction, and fiction has the danger of them becoming fact. So who is Penny? Does she deserve a place in this programme? And how honest do you think the portrayal will be of what was their relationship?
Well, she deserved a place at his funeral, and you've got to ask yourself that she was the only person really there outside the immediate family. Yes, she's the wife of his cousin, the estranged wife.
Estranged wife, yes.
You know, the fact is that she is the Countess Mountbatten. He's living on the estate, but they're separated effectively. But for many, many years, they were very, very close, in both intellectually, and of course she was his carriage riding companion.
They had a lot of shared interest.
They had a lot of shared interest, but if you look at some of the photographs, and when I was writing the book on Prince Philip, his biography, Prince Philip's Century, you look at some of the photographs of them together when she was a very young, beautiful woman. He was probably in his early 50s and still a pretty dashing guy. They were very much looked together. And I think the Queen accepted Penny's position in Philip's life.
But what was that position, Christopher?
Very close. Very intimate friendship is about as far as I'm going to go on this television.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't think I'd go any further either.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, what do you expect the Crown will portray their friendship as then?
Lovers.
Yeah, I mean, knowing how inaccurate and factually wrong so much of the Crown is and has been, I think the...
In your opinion, yeah?
No. There are so many factual inaccuracies throughout that series. I mean, we were talking about Princess Margaret just now,
yes.
And in The Crown, it had got Princess Margaret meeting Roddy Llewellyn, she in a mink coat.
But it's not a documentary. It is a fact.
In fairness to the Crown.
I mean, I'm sure when we were doing some of the films from the great historical films, they got them factually wrong.
But we go back to the point that was raised a little bit earlier, though. When does fiction become accepted as fact?
Yeah.
And watching
at this very delicate time when the Queen is coming to terms with the loss of her partner of over 70 years, we know that the Queen has never sat down and watched The Crown. It's been explained many times by the palace. But this could be potentially quite hurtful to her.
I think she's probably quite robust, actually.
Yeah, she is. She's very robust,
particularly with this whole subject. It's not like it's going to come as a secret that people are going to be writing about this. And, I remember in the book I did on Philip, I had one chapter called Affairs of the Heart, and you go through it, and yes, he does say, he'd come off it when a woman asked him directly, have you had affairs? Would you think I've had a policeman with me, around the clock for the last, God knows how many years? How do you think I'm supposed to have done that? Well, so did Princess Diana, so did Princess Margaret, so did all of these people have policemen with them all these years, and so did the Prince of Wales. So, and they all had affairs. So, that wasn't really a direct answer. And there's some of the quotes from some of the other very close female friends that he had. One of them, it was almost one of his close friends said, people think we went to, people will think we went to bed together, but we never did. But I had a real close physical, chemical connection with him, and it was a very bizarre quote, But
and this was from who?
One of his other lady friends. I mean, he had several, and. But probably the longest and the most meaningful was with the Countess of Mountbatten.
What's her situation now in terms of relationships with the family now that Philip's passed?
Well, she was invited to the funeral, and I think...
Is she close to members of the family?
Well, she is related to the family. She's very close to the Prince of Wales, because if you remember that wonderful...
Harry's related to the family. There's not a lot of closeness right now.
Well, remember Leonora, her daughter, tragically was dying of cancer. There was a photograph of her embracing the Prince of Wales, and it caused a big scandal. And actually, all he was doing was comforting his cousin's friend, and over such tragic circumstances. But yeah, the Queen accepted the friendship between the Duke and Penny, and I think that the respect that is, how's the way I would put him? It just shows you how mature the Queen was, that she invited her to the funeral, and in limited numbers as well. There were very small numbers, and there she was. And I think that shows a degree of respect. Myself,
respect, and as you say, maturity.
Yeah.
And also acceptance, and you mentioned it, Robert, that, the Queen is very accepting of this kind of situation.
I mean, the Duke of Edinburgh, for all his faults, and he had many, he'd admit them himself, was the most loyal, steadfast consort in history. He was the longest serving, he was most dedicated. Right up to his 95th, 96th birthday, he worked for the family. He gave up an awful lot for that role. And I think in that respect, the Queen respected his view that, for a good marriage to succeed, he felt that you should spend a long time apart and have different interests. Well, he certainly did that.
Let's see who's going to be portraying Penny in The Crown. The very talented and very beautiful Natasha McElwain, who has played many great roles. Does she feel like a good piece of casting?
Yeah, I'm sure. But actually, Penny is a very beautiful woman, and if you look at some of the early photographs of her when she was, out at the polo with the Duke of Edinburgh, I mean, she's utterly stunning, and I think that Natasha McElwain is a beautiful actress, isn't she?
Absolutely. Okay, before we go, I'd love to gauge your thoughts on a report in one of the major Sunday newspapers here, the Sunday Times, that suggests that the Queen has conveyed her wish, despite speculation to say otherwise, that Prince Andrew, who we know is facing very serious allegations of sexual abuse, which we also know he denies, that he keeps his honorary role that he took over from the Duke of Edinburgh in 2017. So, Robert, what do we know and what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, firstly, of course, he's wanted as a witness and not to talk in these.
But there is a private case that's involved now.
It's quite important. She is taking out a civil action in America, where there's a jurisdiction only in America. Yes. So that's where it is. Look, it's difficult for the Queen. You know, she loves the son as her son, but as the Queen, she's also the Commander-in-Chief. But this was something that was sort of promised, I think, to Andrew and was given to him by the Duke. So it's still very personal, this honorary colonel rank of one of the Guards regiments. Now, the Grenadier Guard. The problem is, of course, is that he cannot do any public engagements. And although he is a Falklands War veteran and a hero, a very brave, courageous service that he had, I think it's impossible. Like a number of people in the senior roles of the Guards and other things, it's impossible because he's not an active royal anymore. He can't carry out duties. So you're employing a redundant colonel, and a colonel has to have an active role. He has an honorary role, but
how does this resolve it?
I don't think he can take the role on, and I think he has to give the role up. At the moment, all the palace is saying all of these roles are in abeyance anyway, so they're on hold anyway. And I don't believe that if the Queen was no longer here and the Prince of Wales would tolerate this, because it's damaging the institution long term. We've at the moment got his own son, you know, attacking the institution. You've got this hanging over him, a senior member of the royal family, which means he could never travel to America. But more importantly, it's pretty seedy stuff that he was even friends with this guy Epstein.
And not just that he was friends with him in the first place, but that he continued that friendship after a conviction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is really not explicable, right? I don't really understand what he's talking about or why he did that. But the point of it is, it's damaging the royal family at home and abroad. And I'm sure that if the Queen was no longer here, the Prince of Wales would just close it all down. He'd effectively be retired, and effectively is now, and I don't think there's any way back for him, actually.
Okay, thank you, Robert. And thank you all for your time and contributions today. That's it from us for this episode. Don't forget, if you want to join the conversation, you can find us on social media at True Royalty TV, and use the hashtag #TheRoyalBeat. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, take care out there, and thanks for watching.